Haidong! So in this video we're going to talk about scabbard placement before you start combat. So just so you know what I'm talking about, right? So where do we put our scabbard before we even draw our sword to actually fight? So I'm going to show you three major actual ways that, again, each of them have their own uses, and then I'm going to go into a sort of side tangent as well. So let's talk about a couple options. The first option is going to be putting the guard center. So by center I mean just along your center line, about in line with your navel. So what is the benefit of doing this? So again, all three of these are all legitimate. But what's the purpose of this, right? So one major use for this is if I'm going from completely hands off to hands on. So it's kind of like the Bluetooth of scabbard placements, right? So for example, if I'm kind of just like walking down the road and someone's like, yo, I'm going to be sassy with you, I'm going to try to murder you. Grab, right, and draw. Why is that really nice? Because if it's in the center, it's just equal and opposite, right? So I don't need to be like, haha, right? So if someone's coming in, all I need to do is like, yo, don't do that thing. So it's really easy for just going from hands off to hands on. So this is going to be very heavy in Iaido. So again, most Iaido forms, if not all of them, I haven't learned that much of Iaido to actually do that. Most of them start hands off. So for example, they're usually again on their thighs, right? So as they're walking, so this is a little bit later in the forms. But for example, if I'm walking, someone's coming in and is like, you're going to try to kill me. Okay. So that's a really nice placement for the sword, right? So one more thing that this is kind of nice for is, again, kind of on the same theme of if I'm just walking somewhere, for whatever reason I can't use both hands, or at least one hand on the sword, it's the most dignified, right? So notice that the sword doesn't like swing around that much, so especially if it's a little bit higher up, like it doesn't move that much, right? Now obviously it's going to have a little bit of that wiggle that isn't as dignified as I would like, as opposed to like just in here, right? But if it's here, again, it's pretty close to your belly, right? And one thing you actually do to kind of control that a little more is actually expand your belly, right? So again, we haven't talked about breathing yet, but one way of breathing is to breathe out this way instead of this way, it's out, right? So one way you can kind of keep control of your sword is actually to keep your belly full, and as you walk, it actually moves pretty minimally, right? So this particular placement is really good for those kinds of things. So it's the Bluetooth of guards, right? So again, if someone's being sassy and trying to murder me, easy to get from, right? Or easy to get to your sword without having to be like, oh, my sword is over here somewhere. It's like, no, stop, I see you, don't. So techniques that actually work pretty darn well from this guard is anything going off to the top right corner. So for example, if someone is being sassy and I'm kind of late to the game, I'm kind of like, oh, someone's trying to murder me. Okay. Here, it's pretty easy to block, right? So notice it's going off to the top right. I have a nice angle. It's probably going to either catch and nick on my blade, or it's going to slide off. If it slides off, I can just be like, nope, deadsies. Even if it catches, so from here, then I can actually grab and engage with you from there. So that horizontal part is actually pretty good for drawing out this way, especially into a block. Maybe not so much into a direct cut, but in terms of a defensive, so this is pretty good defensive. It's also kind of less threatening, right? So for example, if you were some random Joe on the street, and I'm like this, I'm like, you're gonna be like, all right, what's your deal, man? Like you're clearly being threatening. Versus if I'm here, even though I kind of have the same kind of shuffle, it's very different, right? It's a lot less threatening. And that is going to be important, at least in terms of again, how you present yourself with your weapon. So if you're trying to be like, dude, I'm not trying anything, like this as, wearing a sword, this is probably going to be the second least threatening, right? All right, look, you can see my sword, you know where it is, I'm not going to try anything on you. This is a pretty good position for that. But that said, this is not canonical with Gumdo, but it is a position for you to know of, just because if you know, again, many different reasonings, you can't just be like, oh, that's wrong. It's like, no, there's a reason for it. But yeah, so this is the, again, non-canonical, but at least a way you can wear your sword. So the second version, so the first is with the guard in the center, I'm actually going to put the bottom of the sword, so the butt of the sword, or the tsuka if you're into the Japanese terms, I'm going to put that into the center. Now, if you watch any of my videos, you know this is going to be my go-to. And I'm, again, going to explain why. So with this one, this is a tactical draw, or tactical position, right? So if someone's being sassy with me, trying to murder me, if my sword is in the center line, all I need to do, so if I'm too close, I can just punch, right, if I need to. If they're not, like I can actually draw, I can just keep the blade on center. It's a lot easier to keep this on center than if I'm here, kind of track the enemy. If this is already honed in on my enemy, a lot less movement, right? So even if he or she is moving this way, I can just keep it moving, right? Keep it moving as I draw. This is a lot easier for me to track. It's a lot more threatening to my opponent. So this is going to be the complete opposite of what we just did before. Someone's being sassy with me, like, all right, like, look, back off. You didn't back off, pinky ring middle, center line, right? So this is going to be true for a lot of different aspects of Gumdo, and that's just going to be, you want your weapon to be on their center line, and you want to be threatening. So especially if we're in combat, you want to be threatening, right? So that doesn't mean I should be like, gruffly talking to you or something like that. The idea is like, yo, like, I have a sword, I don't want to die, I'm pretty sure you don't want to die. If I'm pushing, like, pressuring is another word you can use. If I'm pressuring, like, yo, back down, or this is going to happen. But that's one way you can think of it, right? So this is more threatening. This is the most threatening that can kind of be holding a sheathed weapon, obviously except for like holding on my shoulder. But yeah, so if I have this here, if someone's coming in, it's easy for me to draw, right? Because I can use my left hand to draw in. I keep center line, pinky ring middle, strike in. I keep center line. Even if I don't want to do a center cut, if someone's going with a diagonal, I can still, again, center line, cock it back, and cut, right? So this is a really good position for all of your tactical needs, right? So if someone's coming in, you can pretty much draw anywhere on this side pretty easily. Now, can you do it on the other side? Yeah. It's going to be a little bit weirder. This is actually where the first version actually has it a little bit beat, right? If I'm trying to go in this direction, like if I'm trying to do something from here, it is easier to start from here. That said, it's actually pretty easy to start from here, and as I'm tracking it over, I can obviously do that. But yeah, so this is the one that I use, again, for all those reasons, right? So it's the most tactical, it's the most efficient in terms of drawing into a cut, it's the most efficient if I want to do like a non-lethal damage of just striking or something like that. In general, I like it. This is the one that I do recommend for people who don't necessarily have a specific reason to choose one or the other. So as with everything else, if your master or instructor tells you, yo, I want you to do it this way, do it that way, right? But if you're kind of here like, all right, like, I was just told, like, just wear the sword. All right, well, here are again, a couple options, and this is the one that I would recommend. So the last major position, right, so you might be thinking, all right, that was center, that was center, what's going to be center next? Nothing, actually. So it's actually going to be completely perpendicular to your hip. So orthogonal, because technically it's three-dimensional, but completely against your hip this way, going forward here. Now, you might be thinking like, all right, if I'm trying to be tactile, not the easiest thing, right? Because I might be able to draw into a corner this way, but it's not going to be necessarily the easiest way for me to draw into combat. So what gives, right? I did mention all of these have very specific reasons, so what are they? So one major reason for this particular position is if you have a lot of people. So for example, if I'm right next to someone and I'm trying to do this one, I'm gonna be like whacking him like on the side of the leg or something like that. Generally not good. Versus if we have tons of people, packed in, this is gonna be the most efficient, right? So this is the sardines version. So we had a Bluetooth and now we have a sardines version. So if you have a lot of people tucked in this way, this is gonna be the most respectful because you're not gonna be hitting each other, especially if you're all packed in this way, it's gonna be very efficient. Another thing that's going to be true of this is that it's also just, Aesthetically, it might be a little more pleasing, right? So especially if you are doing, like, again, a group competition more than anything else. It's very easy for everyone to be like this, right? It's like, all right, when you first learn, you might be like, all right, have orthogonal to your hip. If everyone does that, everyone looks the same. Versus, oh, have this in your center line. Everyone has a different center line, right? So some people are wider than others. Some people are like really, really narrow. Some people, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to be a lot more, again, good for you as an individual, but as a group, not as good, right? So especially if you're looking for that aesthetic and that unification, this is going to be a lot more easy to do. That said, this is not a bad position to be in. So for example, if you want to do a cut from this position, it's already most of the way there. You can cut, right? And for Gumdo specifically, because we usually draw into a left-sided cut, obviously there are going to be counterexamples like Sangsu 7, Sangsu 10, all that kind of stuff. But usually we draw from the left side to the right. So in that case, this position isn't that bad for us. But again, specific uses, right? So this is a good group activity. This is a good dueling activity. So if I'm up against one particular person, or if I'm just doing my individual form or something like that, or individual sparring or something like that, good position. This one is going to be good for hands-free, right? So if this was group, one-on-one, just me hanging around, cool, right? But yeah, so those are the three major ways to wear your sword. I did mention there's going to be an extra, and this is again something you probably see me do in my videos. Let's take a look at that. So the last version is not so much as a position ready to draw, it is in fact a position ready to not draw. So I usually do this like if I'm either going to pick up a different sword to work with, or if I want to go hands-on with a student, like fix like maybe their elbow posture or something like that. What I'm going to do is actually keep the sword. I'm actually going to throw it over my shoulder and tuck it in this way. So notice, first of all, the angle, right? So even if I bend over because of the blade of the angle, the angle of the blade, it's not going to fall out, right? So this is a good position for me if I'm going to be moving around and actually like touching things or using a wooden sword, for example. Like if I was in the middle of class and like, all right, I want you to apply this against me like on the spot, I might chuck this over my shoulder and pick up a wooden sword, do the combination, block and all that kind of stuff, put it down, and switch back into my normal grip. I do recommend this if you are, again, particularly attached to your metal sword. I know that's going to sound a little bit weird for some people. But for example, like I have a lot of connection with this particular sword to the point that I think it might even be possessed, but who knows? So for example, like this is my go-to sword, right? So when I'm trying to pressure, I feel my pressure strongest when I use this sword. So I'd like to have this one on me, right? So for example, if I'm in the middle of class, I need to switch, whether I'm going to sparring or anything like that. I keep it, switch it over. Again, make sure you tuck it back in this way because otherwise it's going to be like that, it's going to tip over. So tuck it in as close to your hip as possible. And from there, again, I can be hands-on and all that fun stuff. And it's also it's not that hard to get in and out of, right? So if I'm here and like, oh, I need to switch back, I put my sword down, grab, shift, over, done, right? So if you want a quick breakdown of that, just because, yeah, let's do that, right? So from here, if I'm facing this way, so tuck it. So I forget if I actually used two-hand, actually teaching it. Here, I might throw it over my shoulder. If I want to use the back of my elbow, I can tuck it back, grab, pull into your belt, and you're good. And if you want to get back out, grab, again, as close to the guard as you can, tuck, thumb on guard, tuck it forward, and you're good. Now this is not Gumdo. Just putting it out there, this is not Gumdo, this is something I picked up from my Kendo/Iaido instructor. It works a little bit better when you're wearing hakama instead of this belt, but actually works still really well, and it's something that there's no reason not to do it except for the fact that it's not strictly Gumdosa. So that said, if you're working with someone who's a lot more traditional, don't throw that in there, right? So like for example, if I'm working with my instructor, I do not do this. You're like, oh, let me help you with that. Have I done that? I think I've done probably did that. But anyway, so probably don't do that, right? Because that's going to be, again, it's not something that we were actively taught, and it's really jarring. Like if you've never seen someone do that with their sword, you're like, what are you doing? So this one, if you're okay with it, if you're working with your instructor and your instructor's okay with it, fine. But if you're working with someone who's a lot more traditional, probably hold off on it. But just to know, this is something you can do. This is something that I do. Then again, I do weird things that most Gumdosa don't, but that's fine. So that's a couple ways of wearing your sword. Drills, as always. So one drill is always just try all 3 positions in your forms. That seems kind of boring, so let's try some actual combinations. So if we start with the first one, have your partner give you a center cut. All I want you to do is evade to the side, draw, right, and again, counter. Draw, counter strike. You're going to notice that this is actually really nice for evasion, so if you're evading off to the side, it's pretty good. If you want to try with this one, try just giving a diagonal cut, for example, like from here, diagonal. Or another drill you can do is actually try hitting with the bottom of the sword, right? So if someone's coming in, you can hit, they can have like their palm out, or if they have like a square target or something, hit the square target, grab, you can actually use the left hand to draw your scabbard back if you need to, pinky ring middle, and then strike their head. Again, if they're willing, like make sure they're protected if you're actually striking their head, and then draw back into a nice defense. With the last one, with the orthogonal one, try like the beginning of Sanctu 7, for example. Like so from here, drawing up, one-handed cut, and from here, right? Obviously, if you want to, you can also finish the put away just because, why not? But yeah, so try those 3 combinations with those 3 different placements. And with that, so keep training and stay humble. Haidong!